Another 2 pre-season games in the book, and we're definitely on the last stretch now. We'll be talking all things roster building, as well as answering, at least asking some questions from the last couple of games as we head towards the final stretch. You're listening to the Believeland Brits podcast.
Just the same old Brown! Garrett's going to get him, and he knocks the ball away. Caught by Donovan Peoples-Jones! Touchdown! He got it! He got Chubb! He's to the 30, 20, 10, 5, touchdown! Wow, what a struggle. The way it should be, I guess. Brownies, here we go! Woo, woo. Here we go, Brownies!
Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us wherever you are, whenever you're listening to us. We are the Believeland Brits podcast, 3 Brits talking all things Cleveland Browns. I think it's episode 4, isn't it, chaps, in terms of us being back behind the mics. It's either 3 or 4. Definitely getting through the preseason now. We've had as many games as 30 other teams will have played throughout the entire of their preseason. We've had 3 now, 2 since we last spoke. The 17-15 loss to the Washington Commanders, and then the 18-all draw against Philadelphia yesterday. For anyone who stayed up, neither of us did. None of us did. I tried, but I ended up falling asleep at about 1:30 in the morning. But we're not going to dwell too much on the games themselves, for the simple fact that realistically we've only seen one proper drive, of which included the main starters, and that was back in the Commanders game. The rest of it has mainly been dominated by Dorian Thompson-Robinson and some of the rookies as well. But we'll touch upon that first before moving on to the main segment today, which is looking at the 53-man roster and how that could play out. And I'll bring in my co-host as well as I do that. So to my left, as I'm looking on the screen here, I got Owain Jones. Owain, how's your week been?
Yeah, not too bad. Quite quiet.
Good. Nice to hear. What game is it that you've currently got going on whilst we're recording today?
Nothing at the minute.
No, okay. It's all right. I bring it up because Mark Bartel was able to guess perfectly that during our last recording, he was playing, PGA Tour? Yeah, PGA Tour. So he's got some merch coming through to him as a good little forfeit. See, we give back on the Believeland Brits podcast, folks. It's not just about the insights. It's it's about the giving back, and also the calling us out as well. So I thought that was a good keeping you in check, mate. To be perfectly honest. Just talking about the preseason, mate. I mean, you've been very high on DTR pretty much throughout this entire process. We'll obviously be getting into how the roster sort of shapes up and all the rest of it, but you've got to think he's knocking on the door for if not QB3, then even higher than that. He has been the man of the moment, and that's been without question, hasn't it?
Yeah. I was quite high on the draft pick as a whole, and I know like a lot of people hated the draft pick at the time, and I wasn't high on it, in terms of the player that DTR was in college. Like he was decent in college, don't get me wrong, but I was high on it more because, for me, taking a QB in the 4th round of the draft is, really, really good positional value. Yeah, they don't pan out often, but QBs don't pan out often anyway. And if you're going to hit on something in the 4th round, then hitting on a QB is so valuable. And you look at like the difference between taking a QB in the 4th round this year and taking a kicker in the 4th round last year. Like if one of them are going to pan out, the QB is so much more valuable than the kicker. So I love the process at the time. And DTR has been so fun to watch, hasn't he, in preseason? I think
he has absolutely
surpassed everyone's expectations by a mile. I was sort of thinking that maybe this was going to be a come down to earth game, especially with how many starters the Eagles actually had on defense in the first couple of drives.
Yeah, for anyone that didn't, sorry to cut you off there, Owen, for anyone that didn't watch it, it was explained quite well by the commentary team that was on the ground. Their linebacker core and their safeties were all starters for those first two drives. So, when you got that, and this guy's a 4th round QB pick, as you've pointed out, one. That's no mean feat, especially when he's usually been going up against 2nd and 3rd stringers until that point.
Yeah, and like I said, I thought that may lead to a sort of ropey performance, but it was anything but. Like, he was on the money the majority of the plays. He made some big plays. I thought he was unlucky that Stefanski called really safely when they got close to the end zone, and then John Kelly fumbled it because I think he deserved a touchdown. He very much did deserve a touchdown in the game. So really impressed by him again. The Deshaun Watson hater inside me is very, very content right now. And that 1% optimism that DTR can be a Hall of Fame QB may just have grown to 2% last week.
He's going to be like 24 until he takes the field as a starter.
Yeah.
Minimum.
So, at current pace, he's going to be a lock Hall of Famer in my mind by December. So, yeah, I look forward to an unseating the 230 million pound quarterback that, frankly, most of us did not want. So, yeah.
It unsettles me that you're using all of your credit from being the Pick'ems champion this early. We're not even on the predictions pod. That's next week, and yet you're already spending your credit.
I called the Jags winning the division last year when they were, 4th favourites for it. So I'm calling DTR to be a Hall of Famer right now. I don't expect anyone to be remembering this in 15 years' time to be able to call me out. So why not?
Forget that. As long as I've got ammunition against you in January. That's all I care about right now. But no, it's definitely exciting times ahead. I enjoy it as well. Personally, I think that he should be knocking on the door at the QB2 and really learning the ropes there. I can see as to why they're gonna settle him probably in the QB3. Give him that extra protection.
I don't know. I think he showed more than enough to be QB2 already. To be honest, so in that case,
do they try and get a trade out of Dobbs then?
I think they do. Yeah, I think they either try and trade Dobbs or I don't know. I haven't confirmed it, but I did just see a message come through my phone that Kirk Cousins may have a season-ending injury. So
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah. So given the relationship between the Browns and the Vikings, Kwesi and AB, have they seen, enough promise in DTR that they come knocking the Browns' door and offering them more than what the Browns paid in the draft? And then that poses a question: would the Browns be willing to trade DTR so early on? That could be an interesting one to keep your eye on. But obviously, the Vikings are going to have to do something if that is true. I can't even think of who their backup is at the moment. So that could be an interesting one to keep our eye on.
So I'm just trawling Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called to see as to whether or not there's any Kirk Cousins news. I'm not seeing anything hit the fan yet, but that's incredibly interesting. We've gone 9 minutes into the show and I've not introduced Sean yet, which is a terrible, terrible shame for all of us. Sean, there was me thinking it was going to be a nice little flutter back and forth. Turns out, 9 minutes later, I just didn't want to stop a whine in his stride. How are you, bud? How's your week been?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. I'm good. Just listening in, to be fair, I didn't catch much of the game. I've seen even less. I've seen like the 5-minute highlight package.
Don't worry, I've got an easier question for you, mate. I've got an easier one of which you can answer whether you've seen the game or not. Do I hit the panic button on Cade York?
Look, I think naturally everyone's going to hit the panic button. For me personally, I wouldn't be panicking. I think kickers do miss kicks. It's as simple as straightforward as that, to be honest. I think we talked about this a little bit last week, didn't we? I think, like it or not,
he's missed a fair few since then, though. Just going to point that out.
Yeah, well, look, like the strategy or not, they obviously committed the draft capital that they did because they obviously believed in him. We can debate whether that was the right or wrong strategy. That's the strategy that they've gone with. I don't see them bringing anybody in. I don't see what a competition does because ultimately, you might end up with 2 field goal attempts in the next pre-season game. Is 1 field goal each going to be the determining factor in a competition? All the news seems to be that he's extremely good in practice. I know that obviously that can be sort of protected, if you like, in terms of what gets out, but all the news seems to suggest that he's doing very well behind the scenes. Obviously, it needs to translate to on the field. He was having a good game last night by the sounds of it and from the looks of it. He put his first 3 through, but then obviously missed the one that would have potentially won the game, and obviously had a redo of that one, so ended up missing effectively 2, although it only goes in the book as 1 miss.
Yeah, he dragged it. So he went wide right on that first one, and then he overcorrected and cut it too far left. But even the ones that he makes, especially like the, I don't know what you guys both think, but for me last year, extra points were ones where I had hearts in my mouth because he whenever it got really, really short, instead of it just being like a little lob over, he seems to knuckle it towards the post. He seems to grab. It's almost as if he gets balls with magnets that goes towards each of the goalposts. Because even the ones that he scored last night did that as well. And I don't know, I just want some more consistency.
Yeah, and look, I think ultimately, as I say, I don't think there's any argument really in terms of his talent and his ability. I think the issue is more around his mental capacity to deal with the pressure at this stage. That's only going to get worse because every time he does now go for a kick, there is that heart in the mouth. There is that, oh God, is this going to be another one that costs us? And, what you would hope is that we aren't involved in as many games decided by a field goal. For a start, if the offense is anything like you want it to be, then in theory, you would like to think that you would be winning games by larger margins than a field goal. But with that being said, like I say, I think he obviously needs to have a good final pre-season outing. I don't see them bringing in any competition because ultimately I think the replacement is there and available if they decide to move on from him because you've got the likes of Robbie Gould still sitting there, which seems like the obvious one. He's had a pretty stellar career wherever he's been. I know Mason Crosby's another one that's been mentioned. Obviously got a history of kicking in Green Bay, cold weather, all of that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, bringing those guys in for a competition, it's not really a competition. You know what those guys can do. You either believe in Cage York or you don't. I think they'll continue to stick by him. So ultimately, I would be very, very surprised unless he has an absolute catastrophe in the next pre-season game. I would be amazed if he's not the kicker on week 1.
No, astute argument there. I can't rest easier. I can't. Kicking to me is too important to rest. But no, I can definitely understand that as an argument. In a presser after the game, Kevin Stefanski said that he's confident that York can work through the issues that he's had during the games in pre-season, and quote, he wants to be there for the team and that's why he's going to continue to work really hard.
Which is just go speak of nothing, exactly, yeah. And that's what I say. That's a nothing statement, isn't it? He obviously doesn't want to miss. Christ, if he wants to miss, then he'd have been cut a long time ago, wouldn't he? So it's.
Yeah, but you don't do it on purpose, though. As in, not as in you do, as in you don't shank everything. You just shank the ones that are important. That's how you do it. If you want to bring down a team, you keep yourself on the bubble. And speaking of on the bubble, that's what we're looking at today, folks. We are looking at the 53-man squad. Who's in? Who's likely to be out? Because there's a number of questions that the preseason's brought in that, a few of these people that we thought that we would never really hear from apart from in these preseason games that might end up having a considerable say in, the Browns this season and beyond. So what we're going to do is I've got a list. It's a matrix, really, from Jack Duffin, who is part of the Paul Brown podcast, but he did this for 247sports.com. Take a look at it on the website itself. We're going to actually go through what his locks, bubble, and practice squad are, and see as to who we would take into the 53-man squad, position by position. Let's jump straight into it, guys. So the quarterbacks that he's put down as locks at this point: Watson, Dobbs, and Thompson Robinson in that order, and then the practice squad being Kellen Mond. So Kellen Mond essentially getting cut, and it's Watson, Dobbs, and DTR for the for the locks. Does anyone disagree with that? Now I want to know that you're wondering as to whether or not Dobbs eventually gets traded out, which would put Mond in as QB3. I think that we garnered that from earlier. Does anyone disagree with any of that?
Right, just quickly, I've been well and truly baited on that Kirk Cousins news, so disregard anything.
Kirk is okay.
Said about that. Kirk's absolutely fine. He's tucked up in bed right now.
Is he? He's tucked up in bed at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah, he takes his recovery very seriously. So, yeah. I just think that DTR's play has been so good this preseason. I just don't think they can ignore that when they come into arranging that room. And let's be honest, like, if Watson goes down, it doesn't matter whether it's DTR or Dobbs. Season's pretty much over anyway. So I'd probably rather just give Dobbs DTR a shot to show that he's really, really worth sticking by and put him in the shop window as well. So I reckon he ends up as QB2.
Cool. Run straight on to running back then. Got the locks down as Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford with Demetric Felton. I see Wilkins. I don't think I've actually seen Wilkins' first name before, which is Jordan. Thank you very much, Jordan Wilkins. And then you've also got Kelly and Hall on the practice squad. Now, there's usually 3 spots that go to running backs. Do you agree with Ford being a lock? And then who do you have in as your third running back from that list?
I would probably go on, mate. Go
on. I would think that Ford's a lock. I think although he's dealt with an injury, he was obviously a draft pick last year, highly thought of. He's not played any snaps preseason, which is usually an indicator that someone's very much safe on the roster. I would say for the third running back, I think it's going to be Felton / someone that's not on the roster. And I think it's more likely to be not on the roster.
Sure.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I don't think anybody outside of Nick Chubb really gives you any sort of level of confidence at the minute. There's obviously hope and expectation potentially with Ford, but outside of that, Wilkins is a practice squad guy that's bounced around in terms of like on and off the Colts roster predominantly. He's never really stuck around. John Kelly just seems to be a preseason running back. Seems to be the Browns preseason running back every year, and never ends up anywhere apart from coming back to the Browns the following preseason. So for me, I would be very surprised if there's not when I say a veteran, bear that in mind from a running back. I'm not suggesting we're going to bring in a 33 or 34-year-old, but I think you'll have somebody that's got a bit of tread on the tyres and has been in the league and all that kind of stuff. So I would imagine there'll be another one coming from outside.
I think there's a chance that we may have seen that running back 3 last night, but it wasn't for the Browns. I think there's a chance that Rashad Penny / Trey Sermon, whichever one of those doesn't make the Eagles roster, makes the Browns.
Yeah, Penny had a relatively good night, I thought, in terms of what I saw as well. So he's definitely putting himself in the window if that is the case. Interesting one next, folks, with the wide receivers. Now, obviously, we went out and got a bunch of wide receivers, which is exactly what we wanted. But is there a potential battle here or the need to actually expand the room? So we've got here that 6 are usually taken for the room. So you've got Amari Cooper, DPJ, Moore, Bell, Goodwin, and Tillman as the locks. But then also on the bubble, You've got Woods, Darden, Watkins, Grant, and Schwartz. Don't even need to get into the practice squad by that point. You look at Watkins last night, for example, and last week. Schwartz has come back into the conversation ever so slightly with his performance last night. I thought they actually did quite well last night, for example. Is there a I think that it's potentially too much in the weeds for Woods at this point. But do you see someone like Watkins or Schwartz potentially expanding the room, or maybe with Goodwin being potentially long-term injury, potentially sneaking into that 6th spot?
I have a tough time thinking that Goodwin's going to play any significant part this season. That's a proper bad illness / injury, whatever you want to call it. And what he's been through in his life with, obviously, I think he's unfortunately lost a child since he's been in the NFL. So I have a tough time seeing him going, strapping it up and getting hit multiple times a game. If I was in his shoes, I would find it really, really difficult to go out and do that, given what he's been through. So that obviously opens it up. I think Watkins has played just like DTR and just like someone else that we'll probably get on to on the defensive side. It's been really hard to ignore. And he's playing his way onto the roster for me. If it was a choice between Watkins and Schwartz, for example, there's absolutely no brainer where you'd go there. And even, I liked David Bell last year when he came out of college. But, you look at it, both of them have had opportunities in preseason, and Watkins has shone a hell of a lot brighter than Bell. Although, obviously, very different players, don't get me wrong. But they all are battling for wide receiver spots in that room. And you do wonder as well, although he's not played, I don't think, any snaps preseason, you wonder what the long-term plan is with DPJ in that room. He's going into his contract year, haven't looked like they've wanted to extend him, even though he has been good for the Browns, especially from where he was drafted. So you wonder if a wide receiver needy team comes in with a good offer, whether they go, okay, maybe we've got Cooper and Moore as 1 and 2. Is DPJ, dispensable for the right price? So yeah, I'd maybe keep an eye on that one.
Yeah, no, that's a good point there, actually. But I mean, as you know, I'm quite high on DPJ, and I'd quite like him to stick around. But when you consider just how big the wide receiver room is getting, and the way that they seem to be building it, of which is, more about, but by the looks of it, route running and speed seems to be the two things that come to mind when looking at the room currently. You do wonder as to whether or not DPJ is the odd man out, or whether or not that's something of which is needed in that room.
Well,
but
you also look at those, two of the wide receivers that have shone in preseason, being Tillman and Watkins, and
they are relatively DPJ build, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So you wonder, especially with Goodwin going down, you wonder if they'll want someone more like Goodwin, and then think, right, we don't really want 3 DPJs on the roster. We need maybe more speed. So I don't know how they're going to work it. Obviously, can't really see a trade for a fast guy. Schwartz is a waste of a roster spot for my liking, but
gonna say, are we all anti-Schwartz at this point? Yeah, I think we've said it often enough that employee 10 should go. Yeah, no, good. So we've got some free spaces coming up next, simply because there doesn't seem to be any real challenge. So tight ends, 3 of them usually go through. Njoku, Bryant, and Akins seem to be locks. Don't see how they are not at this point. You've not seen anything to really challenge that at all. 4 tackles usually go through. Wills, for his sins, Conklin, Hudson, and DeJuan Jones. The latter obviously impressing quite a bit in preseason. I mean, even last night there was DTR had so much time last night, and it was mainly because of the fact that Jones was holding guys back for like 4 or 5 seconds. It was not even the one where he was eventually like cast aside. I remember the commentary team talking about, look, he's been able to hold on to his wrists and get round him. He still held him up for like 4 or 5 seconds. It was brilliant. It was a really good bit of blocking there. So good to see that he's probably a lot there. At centre as well, 2 usually go through at centre. Pokic and Weipler seem like locks there. Harris is on the bubble, but I don't think it would be enough to take him forward. And the next position the last position on the offense, at least, that has a true battle going on is at guard. So you've got Joel Petonio and Wyatt Teller as the obvious locks. And then for the final 2 roster spots that you usually get at guard, you've got Dunn, Forbes, Gossett, and Martin. Has anyone seen anything that would put one over the other there? I don't think that we've really seen anything to suggest anything in pre-season or in training that would suggest one's over the other, and whether or not they just stick with Dunn and Forbes for familiarity.
Yeah, I think the coaching staff like Dunn. He's been here before. In a limited time, when he's had opportunities, he's done reasonably well. From memory. I don't think you'll see Forbes. I've got to be honest. I just think he's too injury prone. I know he's probably, if you were to look at a depth chart, he's probably listed up there at the minute. But I just think he's proven, unfortunately, that he's not reliable from an injury standpoint. So I'd be very surprised if Forbes is one of the 4 to make it. If you said to me, out of those 4 that are on the bubble on the list that you're referring to, I would probably say Dunn and Martin will be the 2 out of those 4.
Fair. Yeah, I have to admit, it's not really something that I've paid a lot of attention to, mainly because the starting guards are there and they're very obvious and they are practically immovable. But then when you're looking at the depth, for some reason, I quite like Dunn there. But in terms of the other, I have to admit, between the 3, Forbes, Gossip, and Martin, I've not really heard much of at all. So that's some good insight there. Defensive side of the ball, the edges are all locks by the looks of it. Led obviously by Garrett. You've also got Smith or Okoronkwo, Wright, and Maguire. Don't think that any of the others would challenge that. You got Thomas and Phelps on the bubble. Probably just stretched too far. If you feel like I'm wrong, by the way, please just shout up. At tackle, Tomlinson, Harris, Elliott, and Ika. I think Ika's had a pretty good preseason. With Togiai, Hill, and Hurst on the bubble. Unlikely to unsettle those 4. I just don't think it's worked out for Togiai, has it, in terms of him coming in as a draft pick? He just seems to be one of those that was an early bust for AB. Really, just one of those that was more of a potential that just did not work out.
The only thing I would say on that is I'm not convinced that Jordan Elliott's an absolute lock, if I'm honest.
Okay.
He's one of the supposed starters, or certainly someone that's spent a lot of time with the starting defensive unit. Now, I appreciate they've only recently made the move for Shelby Harris, which obviously probably pushes Elliott naturally down the list. But considering he is quote-unquote a starter, he's played a lot of preseason snaps compared to anybody else that is a starter.
Yeah.
I'm really, really not convinced that Elliott is an absolute lock. It'd probably be a surprise if he didn't make it as one of the 4, as you say, but I wouldn't be. I don't think it'd also be the biggest shock either. I still think they may look. I think they may look to add one from roster cut downs elsewhere. Because of, like I say.
Yeah, I don't think that you take Togiai, would you? If you could, Elliott versus Togiai, I'd probably still go Elliott.
Probably, yeah, probably. But then again, with that being said, is there more of a potential for Togiai to develop into something? Elliott's not developed anywhere, has he, in the 3 years that he's been here? So I don't know. Let's put it this way. I don't think it's going to be the biggest roster move in terms of the impact it's going to have on the season. But yeah, I'm just
It's
not
a
convinced.
pre-season podcast, Sean. We're trying here. We're really trying.
I'm just not convinced he's a lock, personally.
Yeah, the barking mad today is going to be, please give us ideas for future pre-season podcast conversations. We are really, really trying. Yeah, so I like that. I think that is probably the one that stands out. And also something which we haven't actually spoken about, Shelby Harris as a pickup. What a great pickup out of nowhere in a position of need. That really works for me.
Yeah, it's been crying out for that, hasn't it? That was the obvious sort of hole, if you like. That was the one that everybody was concerned about. And like I say, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go back to the well when we get to the roster cut down stage. I think you will find a better, third or fourth choice defensive tackle compared to what we've got currently. So like I say, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see another body coming in when it comes to that. They obviously took a bit of a flyer on the likes of Tristan Hill, Maurice Hurst, but like I say, I would be surprised if they didn't add to it, to be fair.
That's fair. Linebackers, and this is one I'm going to get a Wine's opinion on, but just because of some of the stuff he was putting on the WhatsApp group chat this morning. So the locks, that usually 6 go for linebackers, 3 starters, 3 at the back, waiting their turn. You got Anthony Walker, JOK, Shioni Takitaki, Kunashik, and those are the locks. And then on the bubble, Adams, Fields, Diabite, and Thomas. A Wine. Diabite.
He's been really, really good. Yeah.
He
Same
really
again.
has.
Diabate, Watkins, DTR really, really have stood out pre-season. And listen, when it comes to pre-season in any sport, it's difficult to stand out enough for it to make much of a difference because, everyone will have preconceived opinions before these pre-season games, and how much they'll matter is, anyone's guess. But when you stand out as much as Diabate and Watkins have, you make a case for yourself. Everyone's watching, everyone can see it. So yeah, I think Kunasic may be in a bit of danger there. And also, obviously, Fields has been a good contributor over special teams the last couple of seasons. Yeah. He was an AB draft pick as well, which, as we know, makes, it holds a lot of weight because he doesn't really like to get rid of them. So Fields and Diabate, for me, would be pushing.
Yeah, so that would push to make the 6. And then do you reckon that Kunashik versus Adams is probably the... because I'm looking, so there's 6 that are usually taking up. There's 4 blocks with Kunashik in there. Fields and Diabate make the 6. Do you reckon that anybody would unsettle Kunashik at that point?
Probably not. I probably think that would be the 6. And I think they'd be really, relatively happy with that 6. AB hasn't tended to value linebackers like a great deal since he come in. We've seen a lot of, cheap veterans coming in and doing okay. Obviously, JOK was a pretty high draft pick in terms of the value we placed on JOK. But, to find someone like Diabate who's got a lot of potential as a UDFA, that's massive. And the more of those that they can pick up, the better. And obviously cap-wise and stuff like that will help out a lot. So it looks like a great find at the moment. And yeah, long may it continue.
Absolutely. Sean, anything against that on the linebacker front?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing for me is when we say about 6 linebackers, I think it's probably just worthwhile reiterating that probably 1 or 2 of those are sort of almost specifically for special teams play. So Kunashik, for example, has been a special teams ace, but then with that being said, Adams has been brought in specifically for special teams, and I don't think there's been any sort of secret about that. So if it becomes a battle for the special teams position, then you would say that Adams is probably the favourite for that. Taki, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he's still sort of, not playing currently. Still on the injury list, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, chaps, but I don't think he's I don't think he's
I
played
don't
any in
think
pre-season, has
he played last night, for example, and he didn't play any of the previous ones.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting because he's obviously on his way back from injury. But yeah, I would agree. I mean, obviously, the other thing that we haven't mentioned is, potentially spot opens up here. You could argue opens up, maybe he was part of the battle himself, but obviously another season-ending injury for Jacob Phillips, 2 years running with another torn pectoral.
Massive shame.
Big things expected in terms of sort of growth from year 1 to year 2, and obviously such an early season-ending injury last year, and hasn't even made it to the start of the season this time around. So yeah, real disappointment, and I'd be very, very surprised to see Jacob Phillips play for the Browns again, unfortunately, because obviously just time moves on, and there'll be other players that step up now. So.
Yeah, one of the cruel parts of the sport, really. You put in all of that work, and realistically, something as stupid as that can come in, and in an instant, pretty much your entire career's falling in front of you, which is not great. And obviously, wishing him a good recovery as well. Cornerback, 6 locks here. I'm looking at the ones that are designated as a practice squad. There's no actual bubble here at all. So Ward, Newsom, Emerson, Ford, Green, and Mitchell. My one question here is, when you're going in a 2 cornerback set, obviously Denzel Ward is your one starter. Who would you have as your other one, Newsom or Emerson, going into this season?
I think we've talked a lot on this podcast about matchups, haven't we? And I think that is almost matchup dependent, to be honest. And that's not me trying to dodge the question. I just think that is genuinely a good position for the Browns to be in.
It's an astute answer.
I just think that, like I say, we've said previously, when certain matchups have been sort of heading our way, we've said, this should be a good game for Emerson, or this isn't, a particularly good matchup. And I think the Browns can utilise that. I'm a little bit concerned at the depth outside of the first 3, to be honest. Naturally, you can't have strength after strength after strength after strength when you're building a roster. So you're obviously reliant on your key contributors being exactly that, those key guys. But we know, in all seriousness, the injury history of Denzel. He has missed time frequently. Tends to only be for a game or 2 here and there. Hasn't had any sort of lengthy season-long type injuries, but he certainly missed chunks of time. Newsom's had a few as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure he has. So, I'd be a little bit concerned about that. But obviously the first 3, if you like, on the depth chart are pretty strong if they're all available.
Yeah. 2 more spots to go. Well, actually, technically only 1, because the special teams ones are the special teams players. You're not exactly going to. There's no one on the bubble to challenge York Hewlett and Corey Bajorquez in terms of their special teams positions. So the last position of note, then safety. 4 usually go through to the season. You got 1 Thornhill brought in over the summer. You've got Grant Delpit, who's going into year 3 now, and then you've also got McLeod, who they brought in this off season as well. You've got DeAnthony Bell or Hickman as your bubble for that last spot. You got to say, Owain, that Hickman's made a pretty strong case for taking that spot.
He has, yeah. I think I listened to a podcast actually a few weeks ago with Corey Kinnan, who had been at a few of the training camp practices, and sort of said that Hickman was disappointing him a little bit. Obviously, ex Ohio State Buckeye, so a lot of people would have wanted him to do well in preseason. But last 2 preseason games, obviously, he's come away with 3 picks over the two games. The one in the last game was obviously a terrible throw by Mariota.
Oh, yes.
Overshot him by a distance. Still he showed good hands to actually catch it and
keep it as well, because it was right on the floor.
Right on the floor, and obviously not use the floor to aid him, which we often see in the NFL. But yeah, he has shown that he can be around the ball and cause turnovers, which is something the Browns defense has obviously lacked for a long while now. Is a ball hawking player, whether that be a corner, whether that be a safety. We haven't had too many interceptions. over the last few years. So, if he can carry on doing that, then he obviously has a big shot to make the roster. I think obviously we have 3 real locks, like you say, and that 4th spot, very much up for grabs, whether it's going to be Hickman or someone else from a different roster. But Hickman's done himself no harm in the preseason, that's for sure.
Definitely. Thanks for that, chaps. That's a 53-man squad built up, apart from a couple of veterans that are coming through from other teams and maybe a kicker as well. But it's I mean, just looking at that squad, that's a pretty strong squad that you got there. I feel like in years of old, looking at this sort of thing, they're thinking, God, this position room is really not up to snuff against teams in our own division, let alone the conference entire and all the rest of it. Whereas now you feel like at every position, the starters at the very least are, challengers, and the depth isn't quite as off a cliff as what we've seen in previous years. I mean, we've gone through a time where the roster was basically built up full of what our backups would be in terms of quality as well. So I don't know, it just feels nice and optimistic.
I think the thing is, if you think back historically, like you're saying, you don't have to go back all that far. We obviously haven't had the draft capital because of the trade for Watson. But how many years have you seen, 4, 5, 6 rookies be sort of in the first position on the depth chart in their whatever position group it is, just out of necessity? And all these draft picks have had to be successful.
Yeah.
Like you say, we're not in that position now. Cedric Tillman, obviously the highest selection that we had, and it looks like by merit he will certainly be one of those receivers because he's played well in pre-season and he'll join what is already a talented group.
Yeah, and he'll be WR6 by the looks of it.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Yeah.
And like you say,
well, 5'6", a wine you can look like that. It's essentially 5'6", rather than saying 2.
He may end up 3 or 4, I think.
Look, and if he can, then that's what the Browns will hope for, isn't it? Because that's the way to do it. And then, like you say, you recycle. If you can get any sort of trade value from DPJ, who seems to be the obvious candidate, as we've said, then they'll obviously look to do that. I've got penciled in that I think we'll have 5 players that aren't on the roster currently, because I think they'll get a running back. I wouldn't be surprised to see a blocking tight end. I'm not convinced that the blocking tight end is on the roster. So I wouldn't be surprised to see potentially a blocking tight end. And then I think defensive tackle, we talked about that when we were talking about it. I think they might look at cornerback if somebody comes available with a little bit more experience, because as I say, I'd be a little bit concerned outside of those 3. The other one that I think potentially, and it'll be interesting to see, something I read earlier, I think it was Jake Burns had written a piece on it, but we've obviously sort of just accepted the fact that James Hudson's going to be the 4th tackle. And he's certainly been shown up in pre-season by the play of DeJuan Jones in terms of, Jones. If you said at the minute one of the 2 tackles went down, who would be the one off the bench? I think we would all be clamouring for Jones to be the one to sort of get brought up next. And he sort of toyed with the idea of Hudson potentially getting some looks inside. We've just talked there about the potential lack of depth in the guard position. So I do wonder if potentially a sort of swing sort of tackle / lineman comes available. That might be something else that they potentially take a bit of a look at as well. So, like I say, I've got as many as 5 possibly coming that aren't on the roster currently. But again, that's what the good teams do, isn't it? Because it will just be nothing more than depth pieces. And if you can add better depth, then you'd be absolutely silly not to.
Yeah, we're not used to this, chaps. We're not used to this level of roster building. It's good to see. Whether or not it actually happens or not, find out in 2 weeks' time. Just we'll be back in just one sec. There's just one little bit of barking mad to go through this week, and then we'll call it close.
Here we go, Brownies! Here we go! Woo, woo. Here we go, Brownies! Here we go! Woo, woo.
I like how that sort of elevates what we're doing now. These little breakups. We're gonna have a lot more of those during the season, chaps. I promise you. I think the guys can see the video clips that I've got on this little podcast creator that I've got, and they're probably going, "What the hell are half of these?" All will be revealed in good time. Anyway, my barking mad. So we've had 2 safeties over the last 2 preseason games, and the punts off the back of them. They start on the 20. and the punts basically bring us back to like the 15, 20 yard line in terms of our starting position. I don't think that that's enough of a punishment on a safety. Why aren't punts started, like free kicks, safety free kicks, whatever the hell they're called? Why aren't they started on the goal line? I honestly don't think that starting on the 20 is a big enough punishment. It's either increase the number of points for a safety from 2 to maybe like 4, or kick off from your own goal line and have the offense started around the 40, 50 yard line.
Isn't the punishment sort of like a double-edged punishment that you've conceded points and you conceded the ball?
To an extent, but then you're surrendering field position almost straight away. Like, I find that it's almost on a normal kickoff, for example, you get it back to about the 25, 30 yard line on average. Whereas with these safety punts, I find that they are getting down in like the 15 to 20, like quite often. And then if you immediately surrender possession, and have it punted up and have it punted away, then they're probably back on the 40, 50 yard line. So you've got to complete at least one set of downs before you are not hemorrhaging good field position. I just find that it's not enough of a punishment. Maybe to the 10. Like, I just don't see as to why the offense should suffer for the defense's good fortune.
I think you've gone barking mad here, mate. I don't know about barking.
That's the point. That's the point.
Honestly. Yeah, like you said, you're already giving up points. Then you're giving away the ball, which, turnovers are key, which is effectively a free turnover because it's obviously just a change of possession. So I think it's probably about right, to be fair. I think you could make the argument that in terms of points, it should be worth the same as a field goal, possibly, in terms of it being 3, as opposed to just being the 2. For me, I know you've obviously said it from a rule point of view. The concerning thing for me is it's 2 weeks running that the Browns have fumbled at the 1 yard line after good drives.
Oh, yeah, there is that.
Yeah, and let's hope to God that when 24's on the field that doesn't happen.
Or that they just surrender Watson to actually dive over the flipping pack and, force him to actually work for his supper. Yeah.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, maybe he gets dinged up and then future Hall of Fame.
I was going to tee you up for that. I'm glad you just sort of took the reins and did it anyway.
well, I mean, for me, just on that, and because I don't know when we'll get back on the mics next time. Obviously, we're in pre-season mode, so it's a little bit of here, there, and everywhere at the minute. But obviously, we've only got one pre-season game left now, and historically, the third pre-season game, if you like, was always the one that's the vast majority of the starters played for quite a significant portion of the game. If you like, that would have been the equivalent of last night. And obviously, pretty much none of the starters played. Yeah. I've got to be honest, for me, I'm a little disappointed because I think this offense needs as much time out on the field together as it can. And we've almost sort of sacrificed anything in pre-season. If you look at the one drive that Deshaun Watson actually did play, he completed 3 passes for a grand total of 12 yards. Yeah. I don't think anybody's, particularly excited about what they saw. Yes, the offense itself got down to the 1 yard line. But for me, how much time do you think they play, if at all, in this Chiefs game? Because this would have been effectively, if you like, pre-season game 4 in old money, because obviously it's then 2 weeks to the season. Yeah. So do you think they actually get any time at all, or do you reckon it's almost been a special dispensation because they've had the joint practices that's the reason that they didn't play the Eagles competitive game, or what do you think?
So I reckon that's the reason why they didn't play any starters in this one. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, but Stefanski, in terms of how he plays pre-season a lot, he likes to put out the starting offense for one drive and then put them away. Like, the starters get a drive each, and then they sort of get locked in the box to say, okay, we've gone through the planned offensive drive for this game. That will do. That shows that you can do it. Back in your box. I'm very much the same as you, Sean, though, in terms of the concern, in terms of the passing game, in that it's a lot of short stuff. And something of which Zach Jackson of The Athletic also said, when it comes to the passing game and passing from the pocket, it has been a real adventure with Watson this year. I mean, this off season, which is kind of like to the detriment of all the reports that we heard about Watson and his passing game in OTAs and all the rest of it. And the Philadelphia reporter said the same thing, to which Watson actually replied to said bait as well with a blue cap on Twitter. But people are talking about it, and I do feel like you need to. I feel like it's going to be telling whether or not it's happening next week against the Chiefs or in week 1 against the Bengals. We're going to have to see at least at some point an extension down the field in terms of a long passing game, because we've not really seen it much at all. Even when Watson came back, we haven't seen many long passing attempts that were any good, I'd say. So it is still a question, I find, definitely. Owain, I've seen you sort of shake your head, be pensive. You're currently in almost confused mode on the screen. Honestly, guys, just watch the video just for Owain's faces throughout the show, more than anything else. Anything to add here? I mean, I'm just being a relative skeptic. I know that you're just hoping for DTR season, but until that happens, you're gonna have to give your insight on this, I'm afraid.
I'm concerned about it as well. I've got to be honest. Like, last season was rough. Not really heard too much positives this off season. If you look into it, obviously it's tough looking into it and knowing exactly what they're doing in training camp, what they're working on, etc. Because the reporters on the sideline
feel like we're hearing less as well.
Yeah,
I feel like we've heard less from training camp this year.
I tend to gauge, and a lot of people won't like this, but I tend to gauge like a lot of the training camp stuff off stuff like Jake Trotter, who brings out like a recap.
He brings out like a little report card for the day. Yeah.
And although a lot of people would probably point out that he has a big connection to Baker Mayfield, so can he be objective enough to report on that? Maybe not. But to be fair, even when Mayfield was in training camp, Jake Trotter was quite down on the offense quite a lot when they struggled. So, but yeah, not a great deal of positives. Cleveland Browns Daily is obviously a state-controlled
PR exercise.
Yeah, PR exercise. So although Nathan Zagura might be, and I love listening to him, he might be gushing over the offense all summer. Like, it's hard to know.
But he is a bought ear, yeah.
Exactly. It's hard to know exactly what's going on. But yeah, I'm concerned about it as well. And I do think if he gets off to a rough start, then I think it could come crashing down really quickly. And the worrying thing for me more than anything is if Watson does start badly and it does start crashing down, it's not Watson that's going to be the one, obviously.
Kevin's going to go first.
Yeah, it's going to be him, and then it's going to be AB. So I think they're in a really dangerous spot this year. I'm hoping beyond hope that they're good this year. I think they should be good this year. But if it doesn't go well, I think it could become a mess really quickly. So to end the podcast on a real positive, I'm just really,
you let me worry about that, mate. You let me worry about that.
And just because I know Mark will comment about there being, red light on my face yet again this week, I'll set out a challenge for him. If he can guess what's been on my screen throughout this podcast, we'll do double or quits if he's up for it. So two pieces of Browns
He's
merch.
trying to get out of it. He's trying to get out of it. That's brilliant.
If he gets what's been on my screen, 2 pieces
Senor
of brown sport.
Bartel,
It
you have
doesn't-
been issued a challenge, sir. If you wish to accept it, take a look at the video. You'll see the flashing lights throughout. There's been flickers of red. There's been a fair bit of green going on. There's been some blues. It's rather dark. He's telling us that it's not a game. So this
I
is
didn't say
really
that.
starting to.
I didn't say that.
Oh no, could be a game. Could be. So you're gonna want to check that Twitch account. But
I didn't for
yeah,
the stream.
double or quits. So what's the double on this then? What does it get elevated to?
2 pieces
It was
of
a
brown
hat,
sport.
wasn't it?
Yeah,
Oh,
it'd be a
2
hat
pieces.
plus,
Okay.
plus, yeah,
Plus like a T or something like that.
something like that.
Yeah. Right. You know what? This is going to be interesting. This is the true Barking Mad throughout the year. It's going to end up being like 17 times or nothing at this point. Going to end up owing him a flight to Cleveland. And there's the positive note we were looking for. Just a couple of pieces to finish off on. First of all, thank you very much if you made it through this far. We really appreciate it. And if you want to give us a shout out on Twitter or Facebook, wherever you find us, and recommend us to your friends, and that we'd really appreciate it. We've seen quite good numbers as we've gone into this off season, which is fantastic. We will be at Felson's Club in Birmingham on September the 10th, which is the week 1 game, Browns Bengals. If you'd like to join us, it is going to be our watch party with the full 10 yards. You can get tickets. They are free, the tickets, at full10yards.co.uk/kickoff. And then you can just add drinks on as well if you want from that. Why on earth am I sticking a £10 point on there from the start? Might as well just make it free and then buy your own. And then also our guide is out as well, the full 10 yards guide. We've contributed to it. I've designed the whole thing, so I'm going to be very biased and say it's a very beautiful looking book. I'm receiving the physical ones tomorrow, but the digital ones are currently available for £5. That is at full10yards.co.uk/guides. You'll be able to pick one up there, and it's an instant PDF download. Got a lot of insights there from all the teams, including the Cleveland Browns. A number of articles as well from around the league, as well as some betting advice, fantasy advice, etc., etc. It's quite a lot of hard work from about 15, 16 people, all told, and it's a great read. And I'm definitely not being biased there, but also I am by it. Trust me. Anyway, that's our time. We'll be back next week to talk season predictions. Favorite pod of the year, that one. We're going to see as to whether or not my predictions are anywhere close to our wines, and then I'm going to jump ship, join a wines, bet heavily on it, get some money. No, always a good one to start off, and we will see you then next week. Everyone have a good weekend, and